Hi, my name is Steve Dwinnells, and I'm the director of the Instructional Design Center here at EKU. We have the privilege of working with some outstanding faculty members, and part of the reason for these podcasts is for you to get to know them. Today I have Dr. Matthew Winslow, professor of psychology at EKU. He teaches courses in general psychology, research methods, social psychology, and empathy. And his research touches on prejudice, same-sex marriage, and scholarship of teaching and learning. He is a faculty innovator and serves as the teaching enhancement coordinator for the psychology department. In 2017, Dr. Winslow received the Acorn Award given to the outstanding faculty in Kentucky. Dr. Winslow has developed and taught fully online courses for nearly a decade, from entry-level courses to senior seminars. So Dr. Winslow, welcome and thank you for your time today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really happy to be here, and I can't speak highly enough about the entire staff at the eCampus and the IDC. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you over these years.
Great, thank you. Well, let me ask you this to start things off, Dr. Winslow. What exactly is a faculty innovator?
That's a good question. I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure how many years ago it started, maybe 5 years ago. Two legends at EKU, Hal Blythe and Charlie Sweet, were the leaders of the professional development organization at EKU. And everybody knows Hal and Charlie. If you've been at EKU for longer than a few years, they've been here for, I think they started EKU with Daniel Boone. Really great people, and they just had a real passion for professional development, for teaching, and for helping faculty at Eastern do the best job we can for our students. And their dedication to it was just really inspiring. And they and Rusty Carpenter, who is still here, Hal and Charlie have since retired, but Rusty Carpenter is still here, and the three of them, and sort of I, got together and we decided that, I don't want to take too much credit because it was really their idea, and I just got lucky to be there at the right time. We started this thing called the Faculty Innovators, and it was really an attempt to draw upon the rich expertise of many of the faculty at EKU. We have some really excellent instructors, really excellent teachers who care a lot about pedagogy and care about our students and want to do the best job and are on the cutting edge of instructional research and practices. And so we decided that we would try to identify who they were. And it turned out not to be very difficult because they were the kind of usual suspects at every professional development event we'd have on campus. We'd see the same people showing up every time. And so we got together a small group of faculty, and we decided that together we would all try to harness and put together all of our efforts and really offer professional development to EKU's faculty in a much more deliberate, concerted effort, and really in a wider range, right? So Hal and Charlie, they kind of knew everything, but people got tired of hearing Hal and Charlie with their spiel that they gave all the time, which was great. But we decided, hey, look, let's get some other people from all across campus. We have lots of colleges on campus. We have people in justice and safety who are great. We have people in business who are great, sciences all across the campus. So we try to get faculty innovators from across all of the colleges on campus to join us and really to create professional development based on their own expertise. So some people were experts in metacognition or in flipping the classroom, or they're experts in active learning, or giving feedback on writing or class discussion. And so everyone had their own kind of areas of expertise, and so they could offer either workshops or professional learning communities about whatever they knew about the best. And it was just a great way to tap into the expertise of instructors on EKU's campus. And it's continued on. It's really, I think, grown, and we've some faculty innovators have become more of an emeritus faculty innovator. I think I'm I'm one of those people. But we brought new ones on, and so we're kind of a constant addition of faculty innovators to that group. And it's been so exciting to see what their areas of expertise are, because there are things I don't know anything about, which is really exciting. So that's what a faculty innovator is, and it's been a great thing to be a part of.
Well, you've been quoted, Dr. Winslow, as saying, "My job is not to give my students information, it's to train them how to think." Now, some would argue that it's difficult, if not impossible, to do that in an online environment. What's your reaction?
I don't know why it would be more difficult online than it is in person. And by the way, I think it's difficult to do no matter what kind of modality you're in. I mean, it's a hard thing to do no matter what. So when I try to do that in my in-person classes, it's a challenge. But I don't think me necessarily being in the same room as my students is a real benefit to their ability to learn how to think. Because it's not learning how to think. There certainly is content to that skill set, right? You got to know the different kinds of biases. It's helpful to know what the biases are, and it's helpful to know what critical thinking means, and all the skills that are involved. And we can talk about that. And so I could talk about that in a class, but really it's like any skill. You don't learn to play tennis by watching a video or having someone tell you about it. You learn to play tennis by playing tennis. And that's the same thing for learning how to think critically, or to use the critical thinking skills that we are really focusing on. And so it's the activities that we do, that the students do. Students learn by doing. And in class, in my in-person classes, we might do things during class. We do things during class. But it's really the students who are doing them, not me. And I'm not holding their hand while they're doing it. I might describe it, set it up, and then I give it to them. And hopefully I usually try to get them to work together on it. So it's not me, again, it's not me running behind, to mix a metaphor, running behind their bike with the training wheels on and holding on to them. It's telling them about how to do it, and then sort of setting them free to do it, and letting them fail and letting them struggle is part of it, and letting them succeed and letting them get feedback from their colleagues is part of it. And I think I can do that online just as well as I can do it in a classroom, because, and in some ways better, because, in a classroom it's great because you have that immediacy. You're right there, and there are other students who are right there with them, but, distractions happen, and some students aren't as locked in on what you're doing at that time as you'd like, or as they would like. And in an online class, especially if it's asynchronous, students can work on it at their leisure, right? So when they have time, when they have the brain power, so they can sit down and realize, hey, I've got Dr. Winslow wants me to do this thing, whatever activity it is, and they can work on it on their own and put it aside and come back to it if they need to, but work on it as long or as short as they want. And then, I think that the social interaction part of it is really critical. The connection between students is really critical. And doing that online is different, right? It doesn't work the same way, but it can work. You can get students to do it. And again, if you can do it, if you can pull that off, then you get all the benefits from doing it. So again, any skill that you want your students to pick up, it's in the doing. And so whether they're doing it in a classroom or they're doing it, at their kitchen table, at 10 o'clock at night, or whenever they're doing it, they're still doing it. The magic's in them doing it, not in me being there, not in me standing over them, not in me correcting them, even while they're doing it. It's really in them doing it and then getting feedback on it. And that process, I think, can happen just as well online as it does in person, especially from the student's point of view. From the student's point of view, they're given this activity and they're working on it for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, however long it is. And then they're going to get feedback from it. Now, from an instructor's point of view, it's a little bit different because it's asynchronous usually. And so students are working on it at different times. And so instead of standing at class watching 30 students working on this and kind of walking around and checking in and, doing that kind of thing, which is really an efficient use of my time. I don't think it's any more efficient use of the students' time than an online is, because, it's the 15 minutes, whether it's, in class or on their own time. But for my time, it's much more efficient during class, because online, I've got to kind of go through each person's, depending on how you do it, you have to go through each person's, engagement, whatever they produce, whether it's a paper they turn in, or a worksheet, or a quiz, or a discussion board, or a wiki, or anything else. I've got to look at it, and I want to give them feedback on it. So it's in some ways less efficient in terms of my time. But that being said, it also, I think the benefit is that I really can provide that one-on-one feedback to every student, or someone can. If it's not me, it's a facilitator or a teaching assistant. It's someone who can look at every single student's work, whereas in a class of 30, I'm unlikely to walk around to every single student and give each student feedback. Even in a class of 20, there'd be rare classes where I would do it for every student. So, there are some, it's really different teaching online, but I think for me, there are always trade-offs. There are always benefits and limitations to any kind of teaching, and that's true for face-to-face as well as online.
Well, that leads me to the next question, which I think fits in really well here. You're clearly, from what I understand and from what I've heard about you, your reputation, that you're a very energetic and engaging presence in a classroom. How do you translate that level of enthusiasm and engagement into an online class? That's going to be a question that a lot of our faculty are going to ask.
It's a great question. And when we started thinking about teaching online in my department a long time ago, I was very reluctant. I was really not interested in doing it, frankly. I thought, I really like being in the classroom, right? It really, being in the classroom gives me energy. I'm really, hyped up when I'm in the classroom. I really like it. And so I thought online teaching was none of that and all of the grading. And that is not what I thought was a good thing, good trade-off. I was like, I like the classroom. I'll do the grading if I have to, but the classroom is my treat. It's my sanctuary. And online teaching is none of that and all the grading. And so I thought, this is not something I want to do. But eventually, I was sort of convinced of the benefit of doing it, of teaching online for our department as well as our students. And actually, as well as for faculty, eventually I realized that it was going to benefit me. But so I had to figure that out. I had to figure out, how do I translate this? I mean, how do and I'll tell you, I did it the exact wrong way. I think when I started teaching, I probably made every single mistake you can make when you teach online. I'm sure my online classes at the beginning were atrocious, and I look at them and be ashamed of them in many ways. And one of the ways that I would just, shudder at now is that I thought, well, what I really need to do is capture my enthusiasm in the classroom somehow and put it in my online class. And so the obvious way to do that is to, and this is really what I did. I remember this so clearly. I decided, look, what I'm going to do is I'm developing this class for next semester that I'm teaching right now in person. So I will go, this is back when I did a lot of lecturing. I would lecture in my class and I'd come back to my office. It was fresh in my head, right? I'd just given this lecture, and I would sit down on my computer and I would just record my lecture with PowerPoints and, not my face, but it was just, the PowerPoint screen, a narrated voice over it. And it was fresh, and I had all of the timing down in my head, and I had all the jokes. And so I just recorded it. And so I had these delightful, wonderful, clever, humorous, insightful, I thought, lectures that were 50 minutes long, 60 minutes long. And I thought, man, this is great. I'm just going to, you know, record these, put them up on Blackboard, and boom, all my enthusiasm will come through. And of course, you know, that what I realized was that is just almost the exact worst thing you can possibly do. It was for me, at least. Even though I love lecturing, and I love those lectures, especially, remember, that was my class that I've taught more often than any other, and so I've really crafted those lectures over decades. But students didn't watch them. I mean, I looked at the metrics, and students didn't watch them. They were just way too long. They weren't as exciting to watch as they were in person, if they were exciting to watch in person. And students weren't getting anything out of them. And they really were not translating my enthusiasm, my excitement, my energy, really at all. It was not solving that problem at all. And so what I've discovered now is, like a lot of things in online teaching, for me, what online teaching has done for me is it's made me think much more deliberately about the things that I didn't think about hardly at all with face-to-face teaching. They just kind of came naturally. So this is one of them. So when I got up and, you know, when I get in front of a class, I don't rehearse it, right? It just comes out of me, right? It just flows, and that's just who I am. But if I want to capture that enthusiasm, that excitement, that energy online, I have to think about what is it that is valuable in that? What's the real value in that? And it's not the information, it's not the content that I'm trying to capture and recreate somehow in my online classes. It's the connection, it's the personal connection, it's the interest in students, it's the passion for my material and my courses that I'm trying to somehow get into my online class. And so definitely the way not to do it is with a big long lecture. What I try to do is get that into smaller little bits, and sometimes they are, my introduction to myself in the course, in the introductory module. I always have a video where I kind of just talk to the class and introduce who I am, not the class, not the content, just me. It's not long, it's 2 minutes, and it's just not super personal, but it's something. But that's like the building block. And then I have module introductions for my courses, and I record those. And usually this is me, a talking head, so they can see me. And again, these are really short, 3 minutes. Here's what we're going to do in this module. But some of me comes through on those. There's just no way for me not to, make a joke or talk about something. And usually when I'm making them, something has happened that day, and so that kind of worms its way into my module introduction, and so it's there. And so those are kind of explicit ways. But really, I don't know if students are picking up on this or not, but what I think is that a lot of me and my excitement and my passion comes through in the feedback that I give students on their work. So I give plenty of feedback that is, relative, not generic is not the right word, but kind of focused on the content. Great job. This is a great part, or this is a great answer. But I try to not limit myself to just those things. And I try to really reflect on what the students have done and submit it to me, and think like, what's one thing I can encourage them about? What's a reaction to something that they did that was not just kind of evaluative, like great job. It was, that's a great point about this thing, or that happens to me all the time. I was just working with students on APA style this week, and it's a stupid thing, APA style, in my opinion, and students don't like it. And there's a million rules, and students, actually some students were kind of complaining about how insane it is. And I was like, I was just giving them feedback like, yeah, this is a crazy rule. I always have to look this one up, or I really wish they would change this rule because I hate it. And just little stuff like that is super valuable. And I get it back from my students, tenfold when I do those things. Students notice, I guess I do know that they notice it, at least, because they'll say things back to me maybe not right then, but eventually I'll see something where it's clear that they caught that. They noticed that, and that made it, that made an impression on them, stuck with them in some way. And the other thing I've learned, and this is another mistake I made early on, was I found myself having a real hard time giving real personalized feedback on assignments or activities. And what I realized was I didn't like reading their activities. I didn't like reading what they wrote because my assignments were pretty boring. And they weren't, capturing their interest at all. And so I started to change, what I was asking them to do. And now what I tell people all the time is I never give an assignment that I don't want to read when I get it back, that I'm not excited to read when I get it back. Because if I'm going to be excited to read it, that probably means that they're excited to do it. And those are the most beneficial things, I think, for the students, things that they can get excited about. And I'm not always, asking them to write about their, favorite movie or whatever. I mean, I'm not always asking them to do things that they will always find enjoyable, but if I can convince them that there's a value to it, and there's really something that they're going to get out of it, and it's not just busy work, then they're going to put something into it that it's going to be hard for me not to respond to in some way, because they're going to be talking about something that's meaningful to them, that's valuable to them. And well, that's easy to talk about. It's easy to reply to. It's like, wow, that's a great point. Or, really thank you for sharing. I've said thank you to students more in the last few years than I probably in my first 15. And it's just always like, wow, thanks for sharing that, or thanks for, going above and beyond what I asked you to do, or sharing something that I didn't know anything about that was a tangential thing to what I was asking them to do. They're like, well, actually, and now it's about, it's about the pandemic, it's about, economics, or it's about their family stuff or whatever. And it's always appropriate, but it's always really revealing. But, I do think that they're not going to say those things unless I put myself out there to them. I'm honest, and I trust them with information about me. I really, my entire career, I felt a little, the sort of the squeamishness about being too personal in my classes. And I definitely think there's a line there. You don't want to be too personal. I remember instructors who were too personal, and that I didn't want to know about those things. But there is, I do think there's value in being vulnerable, right? And saying honest stuff to students about things that are going on around the world in my life that are related to our class. And I'm frankly, not all the time, but sometimes either explicitly asking them to do that same thing, or I'm leaving it open that they could do those things, right? So I'm asking them about this, but even I know that they could be talking about their own life in some meaningful way. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But they're not going to do it unless I've done the same thing. So, if I want my students to make meaningful connections in my classes, between my class and their life, and I always do, and I hope people do in general, then I've got to be able to open up my life to them as well. And so that goes a long way, I think. I think that means a lot to students. And I just get, a lot back from students. And again, some of it's personal, but some of it is just, it seems like they're willing to do more than they have to when they know that I'm invested in this class in a real personal way. And I'm fortunate that I teach psychology. So, I'm teaching about, how the brain works, or about how we think about other people. And so it's really easy to relate it to my life, to their life. And so I don't know what it's like to teach other disciplines, right? I don't know. I guess it might be harder. I don't know. But still, I think, I hope that every instructor wants their class to have a lasting and meaningful impact on students' lives. And I think that, to me, that means getting them to think about how my class relates to their life in some meaningful way.
Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Winslow, because we've hit around it. You've made some excellent points. But tell me one thing that you've taken away from your classroom teaching that has improved your online teaching, and vice versa. What's one thing you've learned in online that has really helped your classroom teaching?
The easier one of the two is thinking about how online has helped my in-person teaching, because there's so many ways that when I started teaching online, I was like, oh, wow, man, this is such a great thing. I figured out finally that now I'm going to do in person, in my in-person classes. One of the things that I learned on teaching online is that clarity of instructions, you cannot be clear enough. You can't be too clear in instructions about what you want students to do. And again, this is one of those things that happens sort of organically in a face-to-face class. I gave, like a paper, I signed papers that I did it face-to-face as well as online. And when I signed them online, all of a sudden I started getting all these people posting in the discussion boards and sending me emails. What do you mean by that? And how does this work? And how long do you, and I was like, oh, I've been giving the same instructions for years. Why don't you get it? And it dawned on me, oh, well, it's because in my in-person classes, students ask me before and after class, oh, hey, what would you mean by that? Or, I can't tell how many times a student would ask me at the beginning of class, before class started, hey, I've got a question about the paper. And I would just say, oh, wait, let's wait till everyone gets here. I'm sure other people have those same questions. And so class would start and I'd say, what was your question? And they would ask the question and I would answer the question, and probably a bunch of students in that class. And I just did that all the time and I didn't even think about it after a while. That didn't happen online, right? There's no organic way for that to happen, right? So, I mean, the kind of class discussion board is the mechanism for that. But what I learned was that class discussion board for questions about the class is a great, valuable thing, and I always have it. But my goal is always, as my courses get refined over time, is for that discussion board to be used less and less. I've got a good class at the end of that term when I can look back at that and see that there are very few questions, because that means I've figured out where all of the kind of hidden instructions are, my assumptions are, really, because I have a lot of assumptions in my head about how school works and what papers means, and it's the hidden curriculum that people talk about that, as professors, we have learned about, our whole life is school. And so all the rules about how school works that are totally unstated, we know about, and it's not until a student teaches you that not everyone knows about those things that I realize, oh, okay, I really need to make that clear. And especially with a bunch of, as many first-generation college students as we have at EKU, they don't know about how the unstated curriculum, the hidden curriculum works. They don't know about those things. Someone in my class just the other day said something, and I was like, oh, that's the hidden curriculum. I didn't realize that. Oh, I think it was EBSCO host. They're like, what's EBSCO host? And I was like, oh, well, yeah. I mean, that was part of my class. And so I'm happily that was part of my class, but they didn't know about it ahead of time. And I'm like, oh, well, that's search engines and, academic search from here and all those things. They've only been around forever and, in their minds, but they didn't realize, it's not obvious to me that they didn't know about it. So all those hidden things. So what I learned was you got to make your instructions so much clearer than I think I need to make them. And that works for both online and in person. So what have I learned about from face-to-face classes that helped me online? I mean, and this is another thing that I think is really important. And I'm not sure if I learned it one way or the other, but, and this is not my revelation or a big revelation that probably people don't know, but it's something that I'm realizing more and more now, especially in the pandemic, is the incredible value of student connections between students. It's just so, I just think we underestimate it all the time. I do. I have. And especially in face-to-face classes, you walk in and it's not so much anymore, but it seems like, I used to walk in and students would talk to each other. And then in my classes, they do a lot of group work. And so they talk to each other. And sometimes I can see that they become friends over the semester, and that's great. And sometimes I've seen relationships form, which is interesting. But, putting that online is, again, it's one of those things that you have to be really deliberate about and really mindful of. And it doesn't happen sort of organically. I mean, this is not going to just happen on its own. So you've got to construct your class so that students interact with each other. And the part of the benefit is just social and the connection. And boy, did I hear that a lot in the pivot semester. Man, I mean, I just heard it all the time from my students that they were just craving connection. And I think, that's driving a lot of at least discussion about what's going to happen this fall, is that I think a lot of students definitely want to come back to campus. I mean, they want to get back to how it was before the pandemic. And, whether we're going to be able to do that is a different story. But that desire is not just because they want to, like have parties and, get away from their parents. It's that social connection is really important, just socially, psychologically, but in terms of education, it's really important. And not just because I have a lot of group work and I get students to work together and have students give each other feedback on their work, which is, I think, a really valuable thing. But it's also that, they learn from each other all the time. I mean, they see what other people are doing. They talk to each other, like, how did you get ready for that? It's a lot of informal stuff as well as the formal things that I ask them to do. So, I really spend a lot of time in my online classes and my face-to-face classes thinking about how I can get students to pay attention to each other. Instructor presence is really important, which was we were talking about before, really is about how I have a presence in my online class, how they get to know me. But student presence and student voice and student connection, those are so critical in every class I can think of.
Very good. Dr. Winslow, you've been a long time instructor, professor. You've taught in different modalities. And there's a lot of literature, a lot of talking heads out there that talk about the future of online learning and how it will take over the world almost as though it were a virus itself. But in your opinion, what do you see the future of online learning being? What do you see its future to be like?
Well, it's certainly not going away. And I'm thankful for that. And there have been a lot of pieces recently in New York Times and the Chronicle of Higher Ed about online, and some of them have been pretty disparaging of online education, and they must be written by people who have never taught online, or never taught online enough, because online teaching is like any other kind of teaching. It can be done terribly. I mean, I've had terrible face-to-face classes as a student. And I remember, being a student in class, and it was a terrible class. I mean, so I've had terrible in-person classes. I probably have taught terrible in-person classes. And same for online. And online can be done really well. And, MOOCs got a really bad rap when they came out, 7 or 8 years ago. And that was going to be, taking over education. It was going to be massive classes of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, students all in one course, taught by some, master teacher or team, whatever. And I mean, I've taken MOOCs before. I've been a student in MOOCs a bunch of times, and, they are what they are. I don't think they're going to take over education, but it's not because they're a bad idea. Because I really don't think MOOCs are a bad idea in general, because some people are better at teaching than others, right? So, and that goes for in-person or online, right? Some people are better, some classes are better than others, and not every class has to be taught the same way. And there are people who teach in a very different way than I do, who are incredible instructors that I really respect, and their students get a ton out of it, and I could never do it that way. And so I'm up for diversity in how you teach, but you know, if you've got a really great instructor teaching a class, and there are a bunch of other people teaching that same class who are not as good, and you could put every student into that really good class, why wouldn't you do it? If you could maintain the quality with the increase in enrollment, I don't know why you wouldn't do it. So we could do that at EKU, and in some places we do, right? We have massive courses, big enrollment. I teach a large enrollment course of Introduction to Psychology, but there are plenty of other people who teach that same class in smaller classes, and that's great. I think I'm glad we have the diversity, but and I'm not saying that everyone should be in my class, because you know, again, I'm not the be all end all for sure, but I think online teaching is going to be around, and I think it's only going to grow, and I think it's going to get better. I mean, it's gotten better in the time that I've been doing it. I can see that I've gotten better at it. I think we've all gotten better at it. And the technology is getting better. It's getting more diffused and more immersive, and that's going to increase. So, you know, eventually we are going to be, you know, doing augmented reality teaching, probably, if not virtual reality teaching in some way. And I think, you know, that'll be a fad for a while, but then eventually it'll, you know, creep down to all of us doing it. And why not? I mean, it might really be valuable for some things, like any other tool is. You know, the thing that scares me about it a little bit is that, well, two things scare me about it. And one is related to what I just said, and that is that there's some people who have been in this online teaching game for a long time, right? And there are some people who have a lot of money, a lot of resources that they can put into increasing the quality of their online offerings. More power to them. That's great. You know, I'm thinking about places like Arizona State, which I know that some people think of in derogatory ways. I don't. I think they're an incredibly innovative school, and their goal, their stated mission, is to have the biggest enrollment they can possibly have. I mean, they want to grow their enrollment to be as big as they can get it, hundreds of thousands of students from around the world. And they're really good at it. And so what I worry about, just from a very parochial point of view, is that, you know, students are going to realize that they can be anywhere and take Arizona State online classes. And indeed, they're advertising in our market. They would love to take our students from us and put them into their classes. And it's not clear to me why. Well, I think it's up to us to make it very clear why our students should take our classes and enroll at EKU instead of Arizona State or Purdue or any Western Governors or all the other competitors that are out there. And I think we can do it, right? I think EKU is in a good position to make that argument because we do have local contacts and local connections and local roots. And we're smaller, and I think we can have better connection with our students than they can. But I don't think it's because we teach necessarily better classes than they do. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I'm teaching my class any better than somebody at Arizona State who probably gets paid a lot more and has a lot more resources available to them than I do, instructional designers and staff and everything else. I don't know why I'm necessarily any better than they are at my job. But I do think EKU has something to offer our students that's unique. The other thing that worries me is that, and this is happening too, is that people see online education as a way to unbundle the university. So instead of our students thinking that they need to get a college degree, a bachelor's degree, what they're going to realize, what they're going to hear are people telling them that they don't need to go to school for 4 years. They can take this online program that's 2 years, and it's much more specialized. And it's not it's going to be much more specialized on perhaps an occupation, a job, or a set of jobs, whether it's, coding or customer service or marketing or persuasion management, whatever it is. They're going to be much more targeted, and it's going to be cheaper, and it's all online, and it's going to be done pretty well. And so again, EKU has to have an argument for why our students should come here instead of go there. And in my mind, it can't be that we can't rely on the argument that those other programs are not as good as ours, because they have been probably up till now, especially the ones that were for profit. I think we're very not great quality, but that learning curve is one that they're working on, right? They're getting better and they're getting cheaper. And so we can't rely on just our quality, which has been better than theirs, I think. And we can't just rely on, hey, well, of course you need a college degree. Like, the value of a college degree in some ways has never been higher than it is now. Like, everyone understands how valuable a college degree is. It's just worth $1 million in your lifetime, and all those arguments. But, students are very savvy to their return on investment now, right? They're going to invest 4 years potentially, and a lot of money and effort with us here at Eastern. They better get something out of it, right? They are now very savvy about what's that going to mean for me. And if we say to them, come to eCampus and come to take our online classes, it's going to be great. It is great. Our classes are great. Our programs are great. But if we just say, because you need a college degree, what they're also going to hear from someone else is, well, yeah, but you can get a certificate or a license or a certification or a badge or a credential from us in 2 years. And we'll work with you on financing and all the rest. And it's gonna, if your class at EKU is going to be online, our class is online too. So if you're going to sit at home and do it from home, you might as well be doing it with us for 2 years or for cheaper. We've got to have an answer for that. So I think the future of online education is bright. I mean, I think that schools like ours are going to continue to do it for a lot of reasons, and some of them really good reasons. But we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to our competitors, because they're out there, and universities just don't have a corner on this market like we used to.
This has been a fascinating discussion, Dr. Winslow, about online learning, classroom teaching, all these things. But we're headed into uncharted waters here in this coming fall. You're going to have some instructors who've never taught online, and many perhaps are dreading it. Some perhaps are embracing it. Some are just doing it because that's what they need to do.
Yeah.
If you had the opportunity to talk to all the instructors who will be teaching for the first time online this fall, what is one piece of advice you would give them?
One piece, huh?
Just one piece.
Oh.
What is the major thing that they need to know about teaching online, in your opinion?
Well, if it's about teaching online in particular, what I would say is simplify. You really need to simplify. And that's a hard lesson for me to learn. Again, I tried to sort of shove my square peg in-person class into the round online teaching hole, and it didn't work. And some of the reasons it didn't work was because I thought, well, hey, look, they've got seemingly more time, right? We don't have 50 minutes in class or 75 minutes in class. I'm going to give them this thing, and I'm going to let them work on it for a week or even a few days. And I thought, well, they can work on it in little pieces, but they've got, all this time. And so I thought, well, let's make this a really rich meaningful experience for my students by throwing a bunch of stuff at them. And that was a mistake. I mean, that really, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for eCampus because eCampus courses are only 8 weeks long, and students are only taking 2 classes at a time in eCampus. So that works. I mean, you really can do it that way. But for classes that are going to be taught this fall at EKU that are 16 weeks long, that a lot of us are going to be teaching, myself included, that I'm going to be teaching an online class for 16 weeks for the first time ever. I don't know. It's going to be weird to have that much time. But what I keep reminding myself is my students don't have just one other class they're taking. They have the normal load. They have 3 or 4 or maybe 5 other classes in addition to mine. So complicating my class is not doing them any favors. So I've been guilty of adding in tech to my class. I get excited about a new tech product, whether it's a website or it's a interaction thing or it's Twitter. I want students to use Twitter, Snap, or, so I'm trying to, sometimes I'm trying to meet them where they already are. And sometimes I just hear about this thing and I get really excited about it. And I can't say I've stopped doing that, but I've stopped doing it as much. Because every new thing that I introduce into my class is a new platform that they have to learn how to use, and it's going to always cause problems no matter what. And again, the instructions for using it are never clear enough, and there's always some technical issue that goes on. It just, without fail. And so simplify your technology use and simplify what you're asking the students to do. You just can, I have made the mistake of asking my students to do too many different kinds of things and just too many things. And so I think simplify, reduce, those are the things that I would want them to be thinking about because, if anything, it's just teaching online, you've got to simplify in general. And don't forget, when we had to pivot in the spring to that online and delivery, there were lots of good reasons to simplify what I did. And I definitely simplified what I did. I cut out a bunch of stuff and I made a bunch of other stuff totally optional. And there are a lot of good reasons for that. And one of them was that we were living in a pandemic, right? I mean, that was hopefully a semester we'll never have again, a time of incredible, anxiety for me and for my students and for all of us. And I just heard a million stories from my students, and almost every one I had not heard before and couldn't anticipate. And there's just a lot of hardships going on, and the pandemic will not be over this fall. As much as we all wish that somehow we could snap our fingers and go back to what I call the before time, that's not going to happen this fall for sure. I don't know when it's going to happen, if ever. And so I know that I will be dealing with teaching from home, working from home. I don't plan to go into EKU for any reason if I can avoid it. And so it's been hard for me to adjust to teaching and to working online. It's really been a hard thing. I mean, and I've got it a lot better than most people, and a lot better than our students do. So just don't forget all of the reasons why we felt compassion for our students, for all the things that they're going through, all of the financial and health and mental illness, mental health issues, plus all the things that have happened since then, Black Lives Matter and all the social upheaval that's going on, that is going to be affecting them, I expect. It's affecting me. And fortunately or unfortunately, students don't tend to pay much attention to the election, but that's also going to be what I suspect will be an incredibly divisive and tumultuous time. And so all of those things are going to be happening at the same time that we're trying to get back to some normalcy, if we can, in our classes. And for me, it's going to be really tempting to be like, okay, here I am back in my sort of safe space where it's classes, teaching, these things I'm used to dealing with. This is sort of my wheelhouse, and so I feel comfortable here. But I'm going to be reminding myself to, have compassion for myself, because I'm going to be dealing with all those other things too. And definitely our students are going to be. And so don't forget that. We have to be understanding about those things, and simplifying is a way to be compassionate. And I'm never for dumbing down your course. I'm never for reducing, what my goals are. My goals for the class, certainly weren't, I didn't take away any of the goals from my classes. And in fact, I think I focused more on the really important goals in my classes because of the pandemic. And that in some ways has been a benefit to me, but, because it really made me think, what's the most important thing? What's the really most important? I cannot expect my students, this is back in the spring, I cannot expect my students to do all of that they were going to do and think about things that they were going to think about, the way they were going to think about them before the pandemic. It's just not possible. I can't do it. They can't do it. I can't expect them to do it. It's unreasonable. So what is it that's really important to me? What do I really want them to walk out of my course with? And that's really what I focused on. And I really said to them explicitly, these are the most important things to me. Focus on these things. And if that's all you can do, forget the rest. I'm happy. No problem. Right? Just forget about it. Let it go. And if you've got the space, the mental space, the time, the energy to do that stuff, it's all there. I mean, I didn't take it away. It was all there for them to get if they wanted it. But I just said, here, look, these are the things that are most important to me. If you can only work on some things, work on these. If you've got a little more time, work on these. If you got a little more time, then do, but I left it up to them really. And that was really a revelation for me in many ways, because it made me really, really think hard about the most important things in my class. And so, I know this fall I'm going to be really focusing on those things and simplifying down to those things and trying to let go of the rest. I mean, I'm going to put it all out there. I mean, it's all there, but I'm going to tell them very explicitly, these are the things that I really think you should care about. And frankly, my job is to try to convince them that those are really important things that they should care about. And if I can convince them that they should care about it, then it really doesn't matter if I require it or I don't require it. They're going to do it either way, right? Because they understand the value of it. So my job is to convince them of the value of my class and what things are the most valuable in my class to them. And if I can do that, then they're going to do all the work that they need to do in order to get those things. And all I got to do is sit back and watch it happen. So that's going to be my strategy.
Well, that's great advice. And I know the listeners of this podcast will garner a lot from that statement. So I appreciate that. Before we leave, Dr. Winslow is actually the host of his own podcast series. And Dr. Winslow, if you would just give us a brief rundown of what the podcast series is about and how we can access it, we'd appreciate that.
I appreciate the amplification of this podcast. It's actually not my podcast. It's the Psychology Department's podcast. And I should be clear to give credit to the executive producer of the podcast, Dr. Robert Brubaker, who is now retired, but he was and probably is the executive producer emeritus, maybe? I don't know, or honorary something. Anyway, it was his idea and my idea to put this thing together, and it's called Mind is the Matter, and it's not really yet on all of the podcast platforms where you can get all your rest of your podcasts. We're not on iTunes and all that stuff yet, but we only have, I think, 5 or 6 episodes. But the goal of the Mind is the Matter podcast is to really get faculty in the psychology department to come in and talk about what they are passionate about. And so for some of it, it's mostly their research, and for some of it's their research and their teaching. Other people, it's just their teaching. And so it's really a chance for me to interview my colleagues and find out what they're getting into, what they're interested in and what they're doing, and just to get that word out. And I really enjoy doing it. I've learned a lot about my colleagues. Some of my colleagues I've been colleagues with and friends with for a really long time, and I still didn't know everything that I learned about on the podcast. So it's fun. They're not that long. And anyway, if you search for Mind is the Matter, it's actually hosted in the Communications Department's website at EKU. The Communications Department has a podcast studio in the Combs building, and that's where the podcast takes place, or where it has taken place. It's a very nice facility, and they actually do all the technical stuff, and they are, this is kind of one of the one of the services that they provide. It's really at a nominal cost. They charge us a very small amount that we can barely afford, but we can afford. And they do a great job, and they host it. They put it up on their platform. And so they do all the technical stuff, and it's great. So if you go to the Communications Department's website, you'll be able to find their podcasts, and you can look for Mind is the Matter.
Okay. Well, Dr. Winslow, we have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you and learning more about you and about online teaching and about your teaching philosophy. And I know this will be very helpful for those who listen to it. And I just thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy and effort expended at EKU. You are one of our outstanding professors, and we just thank you for your commitment to our students, especially our first generation students.
Yeah.
And just know that you're very much appreciated.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And again, right back at you with the people at the IDC and eCampus are fantastic. And my teaching has improved so much from my exposure and working with people in your area, face-to-face, online, all around. And so it's really been my pleasure and my benefit to be involved with you. And I guess if I just would say one thing, it's like, I'm sure that people watching this podcast, if you've gotten this far through it, it's because you love what you do. And we're here for our students, and that's the great thing about EKU. And our students are going to come back to us this fall in some way. I mean, hopefully all of them and more. And whatever students show up are going to be here because they want something from us, and they expect something from us, and it should be the very best thing that we can give them. That's our job here at EKU, right? Hal and Charlie used to say, teaching is job one, right? Excellence in teaching is job one. So that should be our motto, and we should all be focused on that. So, help each other, reach out. I'm happy to help anybody who has any questions to reach out to me, email me. I'm around all the time, so I'm not going anywhere in the pandemic. So let me know.
Thank you, Dr. Winslow.
Thank you.